Joe Grant is one of the living legends of animation, though he would certainly object to such a highfalutin title. Joe was doing clever movie star caricatures for a Los Angeles newspaper in the early 1930s when Walt Disney hired him to design the many guest stars in the Mickey Mouse cartoon, Mickey's Gala Premiere. Joe enjoyed the studio atmosphere, so he stayed and quickly rose through the ranks, finding his strength in story and character development on such Disney classics as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia, and Pinocchio. After a 30-year hiatus from animation, Joe was lured back to Disney in the 1980s and has made valuable contributions to the studio's animated features ever since. He was even saluted by his friends at Pixar when they named the animal cracker box in A Bug's Life after him. As a man who lives in the present, Joe isn't the most willing interviewee, but he agreed to sit down with me to discuss one of his pet projects. Joe, what can you tell us about the genesis of the feature film, The Reluctant Dragon?
The situation was such that we had a lot of good ideas, but they weren't feature quality and didn't deserve feature length. And Walt had the idea of putting them all together, which I think first was Make Mine Music, and then Reluctant Dragon down the line. So that was really the beginning of the whole idea.
When that feature film came out, it was long before television, of course, and long before Walt became a familiar face hosting the weekly TV series. Did you find that people that you met, in civilian life wanted to know what it was like, how animated cartoons were made?
Oh, yes. It was... that was the most often used question was, how do you make these things? And then when you sat down to try to explain it to them, they found that they lost interest very early. It was too complicated. And when they went through the studio, they knew nothing. They could, in other words, answered their questions, As a matter of fact, it never answered our questions. What was it all about? If it wasn't new, it wasn't important. But today the principle is, if it's forgotten, it's new.
Yes, everything old is new again.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have any contact with Robert Benchley while he was at the studio?
A little bit. He was fortunately sober throughout the thing. But he was a charming person and a brilliant writer. Yeah.
And he did the foreword for your book.
Yes. We appreciated that.
So you had no contribution to the rest of the film?
No, we were in on it, but nothing substantial, no. And that was what was good about those films. It was divided among the directors that were out of work.
Joe established a fruitful partnership with animation veteran Dick Huemer. Their credits together include the story for Dumbo, but they hit pay dirt again with a modest idea that wound up in The Reluctant Dragon.
My role in that with Dick also was with Baby Weems, which is where we had a storyboard of this picture idea as a short.
But when I first saw Baby Weems, one of the things that struck me is how contemporary it was.
Yes, it did. Well, that came basically from the drawings as well. And the drawings were made by Jack Miller, and they were fabulous. And to this day, what you're seeing is just still pictures with very little animation.
But really, you never intended Baby Weems to be photographed that way. It was just Walt's idea to use the storyboard.
Right, basically because of Miller's rendition, which was beautiful. And to this day, it's a model for a lot of story people today. And it was actually, as far as the critics were concerned, was always picked out as one of the best parts of that entire Reluctant Dragon. So we got a little swell-headed about that as impossibilities.
It's one of those films about which you can say, perfect.
It was, and it had no television. It had just Walter Winchell, and all the technology is not. It's stripped off or never was there, and it made a big. It made a hit in that sense.
Joe, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I know it's not your pleasure, but I appreciate you doing it anyway.